So hello everyone. Welcome back for session 3 today. So session 3 is about managing maritime heritage assets during the climate emergency. And the first paper that we have is by Gabriela, Caro, León, Liliana, Rozo, Pinzón, Juan, Sarmiento, Rodríguez, Nathaly, Palacios, Alba, Carlos del Cairo, Hurtado, and Fernando, Cadena, Duque. And they're working for the Blue Collaboratory project. And their title is Co-participatory Proposal for the Understanding of the Impacts of Climate Change on Maritime Cultural Heritage in Tierrabomba, Cartagena de Indias, Colombia. So is Gabriela here?
Yes.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I want to share I couldn't share my screen, so. Yeah, you can now. Okay. Okay. I don't know. No, wait. Yes. Now you can see all my screen. Yes. Yes, perfect. So, well, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Caterina. Thank you, Victoria. I really appreciate this space to present these results about this amazing project. And thank you, of course, for Colombian Amphibian team, University of Cartagena, Cartagena Heritage Institute, that there's amazing team to work in this project. So what is the objective of this project? The objective was investigate and analyze the impacts of climate change and cultural heritage, but with other purpose. No, we want to include the voices of local community to understand what happened for this problem in Tierrabomba Island. So this is Colombia. You can see, for example, this Cartagena de Indias is located in the coast Caribbean. And this was one of the most important port cities. They have amazing buildings in the colonial times, but near to Cartagena is the Tierrabomba Island. No? There's the place that we work in. Maybe in 2022, the project started. So in 2022, there's a picture in Caño with the community. This picture is so amazing. I think it's so beautiful because there are the children, their smile. We finished our activity. We want to understand what happened in their lives, for the children. What happened in maybe the important places, but the places that they live in. So the children draw what happened with the problems of the temperature. So this is their pictures. This is the result. You can see some elements, the raining, the water. And actually, when we talk with the children and we talk what happened in that moment, we have to understand the problematic, because it's not only the temperature or decreases of the level of the sea, because the children live in that way. I maybe give some elements that we in that moment we don't understand, but when we walk in the territory, we see this reality. And I think it was so interesting, but maybe a little sad to understand what happened with the pictures, with the drawing, and this reality. The dirty water, yes, the houses abandoned and destroyed. It was so hard, but we have to do something, and this was the purpose to this methodology, to understand what happened, but with the community. In other hand, we work with the grandfathers and grandmothers, and with the other activity, because we have to understand what happened maybe in the 70s years ago, and recollect this memory. But it was so amazing because we recollect. Well, I'm a historian, so I really enjoy to look in the libraries and the news, old news. So we collect maybe this old news, and we present for this community. And in that moment appeared the memory. and they tell us about some elements. For example, the Joan hurricane, and they give some a lot of information what happened in the Tierrabomba Island, how changed a lot, and we recollect this information to understand what happened with these 2 point of views. Actually, the news, but the memory of the community, and we connect that. Actually, it was interesting because they give some other information around 10 years ago, what happened in Cartagena, what happened in Tierrabomba, because 10 years ago, these problematics increased to faster. So this was to solve these scales, maybe with the periods, but in this moment, maybe 10 years ago, the problematics is too faster. So we have to connect what happened because we couldn't stop. Yes, it's a lot of information in this moment. So we have to work actually with the present, represent with the young community, yes, with the teenagers, something like that. So the purpose of the project, it was to give some tools, maybe archaeological tools like scales, and they put these scales in their houses. For example, she's Maritza, and Maritza living in Boca Chica in Tierrabomba, and she put the scale in their houses, near to her house. Sorry, she take the picture and say and recording their voices what happened in that moment. So the level of the sea inside in their houses, but actually. On the other hand, the people who work in the historical places have the same work. Put the scale in the historical places, take a picture, and send it to the WhatsApp group. So every weekend they record them, they take the pictures and say that this is the way that empower this community to document it, what happened in that moment. Maybe in the other hand, or the other team gives some solution or gives this document to present to organization, to the government, to give more visibility. Yes, because they need to visibility and to find maybe solutions for this community. So this is the other picture. This is our team now in 2023. And it's amazing because they work together. They send these pictures because maybe we believe in the community. The community, when we work together, is more strong. So this is the message. This is the climate change is here. This climate change is in Tierrabomba Island, because we want to understand what happened in that moment. This is the other picture I want to finish with these pictures. The first one is the 2017. As you can see, the level of sea is not the same in 2022. So this is it's 5 years now that we have to understand what happened is too faster, because 5 years, maybe in the next 5 years, maybe it's appear, we don't know, but we have to collect this information. We collect the voices to community to do something and to give some solution. So this is our methodology, to include the voices for this different point of view, the different age, and gives some visibility to understand what happened, but give some tools to stop, or maybe to give solutions to adaptate, or maybe mitigation of that in that case. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. That's very, very interesting, and it's really important, as you said, to include the local communities who are immediately affected by climate change in the whole discussion, because above all, it's like their lives and their history that is being affected. Let's see if anyone has any questions for Gabriela. Do we have any questions? Not immediately. Okay. So I would like to ask something. I was wondering how the attitudes of the local people are. Like, I assume they've seen the change, and they've seen it, even like the kids, as you said, like, we're drawing like more water. So like they have been understanding that something is happening. But like, how do they see the future? Not just for the heritage, but also for their lives? Like, are they worried? Would they want, like, I don't know, the government or the officials to do some steps that are done or not done? How do they feel about the future?
Well, it's too hard, you know, because they live in the reality and maybe normalize some elements. So it's so hard. I remember this year, we asked a boy that maybe to give I don't know, it was some trash, and they give some rocks for them for us, rocks. So it was so strange to understand. Okay, what happened with the problematic with the trash? You give me some rocks, and maybe some people normalize that happen, and they live in another reality because it's too hard to say that, but in a historical point of view, this territory is abandoned, you know, the government, the state. So maybe the opportunity with these elements of heritage gives visibility for the government, because the government say, okay, it's important historical places, we can do something for the places, but okay, the places are not alone, no? There are people live near. So if you want to work or fix these historical buildings, you have to fix the reality for the community. Because I I really want, when I present this problematic, I present, okay, the historical places, but the community, and it's the same problems. They don't have the same, they have the same problems, but the government have to know what happened. If you want to fix the heritage, the places, you have to fix the community. And this is the way, a strategic way to present, because in a historical point of view, it's abandoned. So maybe the community have the same reality, and maybe few people catch the idea. It is too hard to work the local community, but maybe with three people work, and they give solutions. So this is our reality, but we really want to present. But maybe in 2022, we recollect all this information with other institutes, like the universities, the Maritime. Victoria, can you help me with the actors?
Maritime General Direction,
Yes.
the Heritage Institute of Cartagena.
Exactly. So there, this institution, they connect. Or what was the first time that we met with the local community and this government? So they talk about climate change, but also they talk about the problematics, and the community say, "Hello, I'm here, and we need us. You need us. We need us." So this is the reality for Cartagena and Tierrabomba.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's surprisingly, but also not surprising, very similar to Greece. Like in the islands, everyone has an awareness that the climate is changing. They see the wildfires, they see like any like flooding or anything else that is happening, but they do feel in a sense like abandoned in the way that the heritage or really their island life doesn't quite matter, because like the government is promoting, for example, tourism or making more hotels, bringing more tourists, even if the island cannot really sustain more people in the summer when the fires, break out, and there's not enough, for example, fire brigades for the residents, let alone the tourists. So I know, for example, with the flooding that you were saying, like the government in Greece at least gives money as a reimbursement for the damage that happened to build houses again on the same spot. But no one is really discussing, like, is it a good idea to rebuild another house in that spot that just flooded? So like there's not really a discussion, or as you said, like the people are like living terrible circumstances, but it's also their life, and if they're not being a part of the discussion for what's coming next, it's very hard, because they really need to actually make the day-to-day living possible. So yeah, that's very, very interesting. Does anyone else have any questions for Gabriela? No, if that's the case, thank you so much. And please do take part in the discussion at the end. We have a lot to discuss about. And we can maybe start slightly early, Bella Romain talk. She's from the University of York, and she's going to be presenting on contemplating the future of a complex coastal heritage asset in the face of climate change, a case study on Whitford Point Lighthouse.
Hi everyone, give me 1 second. Okay. Hi, so this is basically a brief summary of the work I've just done for my master's dissertation. So Whitford Point Lighthouse, let me just try and move people out of the way. So this is Carmarthen Bay. So Diana earlier was talking about the research done in South and North Wales. So this is Carmarthen Bay. Whitford Point Lighthouse is in basically kind of on a spit that goes into the Lough estuary. And excuse me, it was built in, well, completed in 1866. The sandbanks all around the estuary shift on a regular basis, and that makes historically kind of shipping into the area quite difficult. South Wales was very industrialised, so having a clear path into the harbours in the estuary was really important. So the lighthouse was built. So in looking at it, my approach was to kind of consider policy and legislation, and obviously with climate change, more and more policies are recognising that we need to adapt to kind of recognise that heritage assets will be lost, but none of them actually support the people who are in kind of conservation officer roles or anything like that to actually make that decision and what loss looks like. So a lot of my work was based on people like Caitlin De Silva and Tanya Venture, and how you kind of go about not proactively losing something, but kind of positively losing something. So just to give a bit of context, this is the setting. So again, as Diana mentioned earlier, there's numerous wrecks all around the area, and this is how remote it is. It's kind of a 3-mile walk from the nearest village. Access is tide dependent, so at high tide, if you can see my mouse, it's roughly halfway up the lighthouse, so kind of access is kind of dangerous. It's not easy, it's very exposed, and then you've got kind of this long walk over some not particularly pleasant rocks. The causeway was built at the time, so it's just basically kind of a mortared causeway that's being lost, so again access is more difficult. So one of the process that I took to kind of look at what decisions you could make for something like this, where it's no longer in use, it's in a really bad state of repair, access is limited. I looked at a couple of frameworks that have been done recently, and also Ferretti and Visari's work kind of back some more recently, some about 10 years ago, which uses multi-attribute value theory to make decisions, and it's generally being used for making a decision, so on a group of heritage assets where they're looking for the best one to maybe reuse or something like that. So I took that and adapted with it, adapted that process. So obviously anywhere kind of coastal is probably going to have quite a lot of heritage assets that are at risk, especially from climate change. And so one of the first things is prioritising which of those assets you actually consider, and which ones you kind of say, well, okay, that's already rubble. It's not very significant. There's not a lot to do with it. So the first step is prioritization. So in that you're looking kind of for us in a UK listing, so whether something's kind of just locally listed or whether it's kind of grade 1, which is the highest, what kind of risk it faces, what reuse potential it has, and then obviously kind of weighting those. So you kind of say, well, maybe the grade and the risk are more expensive, more important than the reuse potential. Then you consider significance. Sorry, I can't look at you because my screen's broken, so I'm kind of looking at my screen over here. So significance, again, kind of fairly universally looking at historic, evidential, aesthetic and communal values, and how the heritage asset represents those. So I'm going to zoom through these bits to get to the boring bit. So then looking at risk assessment, so kind of, is there anything historically that's happened, anything currently going on, what might happen in the future? So that's particularly relevant for climate change. And there are both physical and administrative risks, particularly for Whitford, because you'll see in a moment. So the MAVT process then, it's kind of lengthy, but it should be information that people working with heritage already have. So you're looking at attributes, which I'll go into in a moment. Alternatives are the different options for the site. You then weight those attributes, you qualitatively score them, and then they get translated into quantitative scores. They then get multiplied by the weight, and you end up with an overall preference for what you do with the site. And then you can test it to see how reliable that answer is and whether other options for the site might be kind of equally viable, but kind of given different attribute weighting. So I don't know, maybe the cost is the biggest factor for this particular site. But if the cost wasn't a factor, actually, maybe a different intervention would be preferable. So, not quite sure what's going on there. So in terms of prioritization, I took 3 heritage assets from Swansea and used their own, they've got their own heritage risk scoring system. So I'm sorry, I know it's a little bit blurry on the screen, but essentially kind of taking something that was not quite as significant, not quite at risk, rarity wasn't really a consideration, and how easily it could be developed. Now the idea with this is that the higher it scores, the more priority it should be given. So essentially the heritage grade and the threat are the driving factors. So again, you know, something's a fairly easy decision, you know, it's in fairly good condition, it's easy to reuse. Okay, well, just get on and do it. Don't bother wasting your time with this process because you know you've got options there. But for something else that is maybe more significant but more difficult to actually reuse, this process then helps to kind of decide on those future options for it. So just in terms of Whitford specifically, it's incredibly significant. It's one of only 2 surviving cast iron wave washed tower lighthouses in the world. There's a lot of piled lighthouses. The other one is Rotersand in Germany. There were a couple of others built that kind of failed after a decade or so of use due to where they were. But these really were very, very few in general. Excuse me. So this is Whitford Point Lighthouse. And there's one photo of it that we have from kind of, I say shortly after construction. This was when it was about 50 years old. And this then was about 50 years ago. So within 60 years, it had really started to kind of fail from the 1910 photo. So looking at the risks to it, we've got archival evidence that it was deliberately abandoned basically in 1950. They didn't intend to keep it in any kind of good repair. The estuary is surrounded on all sides by industrial town, so it had kind of heavy metals, sulfates, all sorts, and a lot of those chemicals are known to accelerate corrosion. We've had leaks in sewage pipelines, which have resulted in E. coli presence. They've killed shellfish colonies, again producing hydrogen sulfide, which accelerates corrosion. It's also in the intertidal zone. This obviously is one of the harshest areas for structures due to corrosion and wetting and drying. It's a lot of biofouling. And then we have legislative issues. So because it's not been maintained, this is a plinth, skirt, sorry, around the base of the lighthouse, which really, since it was built, just continually erodes, and every 40 years or so they throw some more material in there and it just continues to erode. Obviously we've also got quite a lot of corrosion, cracking. The bolts are wrought iron and they are also failing. It's dual designated, so in the UK we have listing and scheduling. Scheduling takes precedence over listing, which means that it's treated as a ruin essentially, so there's no onus on the owners to actually maintain it in good condition. There's also the whole area, again, as Diana was saying, there's kind of a lot of marine protection areas, and this stretch of coast is subject to pretty much all of them, so accessing it to do anything is also really difficult. And obviously we have climate change. So this is kind of the lighthouse here. There's managed realignment here, so they accept that the dunes are going to go back, and there's no active intervention to the east. So managing this particular asset is quite difficult. The biggest issue is that the plinth is being undermined, and again, it's kind of visible from there. So this is just something to demonstrate what you can do to kind of monitor assets as well. So I'm just going to whiz through. This is the really boring bit, but it's kind of the, I suppose, the bit that I'm doing. Maybe. I don't know where my presentation's gone. Okay, that's helpful. Sorry, give me a sec, guys. No, I don't even have a mouse. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh no, I think my mouse has decided to die. I was gonna say. Okay, I'll use my keyboard, that's fine. So sorry, I'll just kind of whiz through. So the attributes for the site that we looked at for this was things like costs, logistics, opportunities for engagement, environmental and heritage impacts, whether it improved access for people or not. And then we looked at 4 alternatives, so minimal intervention, just kind of doing basic repairs, moving it somewhere, restoring it, or adaptive release, which is essentially letting it go. So people are free to have a look at these later in kind of more detail, but it's just basically the process that the MAVT process kind of goes through. So this is the weighting. I worked with a range of different people. So I worked with the Royal Commission, CADU, conservation officers and engineers. they weighted the individual attributes. So the various factors that needed to be considered, and said how important they thought they were then averaged. And obviously on the bars, the kind of the shorter the distance, the more in agreement people were. And generally logistical possibility, historic values, kind of significance wise, and short-term costs were considered the most important things to consider in the scoring. The qualitative values assigned to the factors then were given a qualitative value, and then scored according to the different experts basically scored each of the options along the top against the attributes down the side. The qualitative scores were then transferred into quantitative scores. Sorry, that's my reminder that I've done my 15 minutes. I'm sorry, I won't be long. So these kind of then give you a quantitative value for those qualitative scores. So that's then mapped into the table, and then they get multiplied by the weight, the average mean weight assigned to those attributes by the experts. So according to the attributes that we'd chosen and how they were weighted, planned or adaptive release was the highest scoring, which in reality, given the cost of doing any work to the lighthouse, things like the access, it wouldn't be attractive for funders because there's no kind of real potential for communities to get involved and what have you. Really letting it go, given the state it's in, is kind of the preferred option. They were then sensitivity tested, and restoration kind of scored high overall, but it's really limited by the fact that it will cost an absolute fortune to do. So this kind of goes into the stats side of it and just kind of really just establishing whether adaptive or planned release is the best option for it. I'll skip through these a second because they're just kind of graphical representations. So my hope in that whistle stop tour is difficult because you've kind of got to do the first bit to get to this bit. But ultimately, this decision allows people working with heritage to justify difficult decisions. It shouldn't be used, obviously, to kind of manipulate that decision. But it's just a way of saying, right, okay, look, you know, we've looked at all these different factors and this is the most viable. It's, you know, considering all the things that are important at the site, this is the most realistic of those options. And then just very, very briefly, so this is just a Photoshop with the lighthouse gone and with it restored. And let's skip through that. There's a seawall that's been lost, and they've decided to let it go as medieval to allow the creation of more salt marsh. But this is just something then that can be done if the choice has to be made to let something go. It's about how you maintain heritage without that physical fabric. And there's different ways of doing that, whether it's having a 3D walkthrough for people to go to. I did a survey with the Royal Commission. We went out and visited it, and there's like a 3D record of it now. And the 1910 photo has also been mapped onto it. So there's different ways of creating heritage. Essentially, we don't have to, if it's really not possible, we don't have to keep the physical asset, but it shouldn't be an excuse basically for losing things that are difficult. It should just be about kind of identifying the best way forward for something that isn't straightforward. So that's me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bella, for this. It's really, really interesting, and it's a very, very good project to do, and also think about all these aspects and what needs to be done, how easy and logistically easy or difficult it is, and basically how to move on with such decisions, or justify even like restorations or demolition or whatever needs to be done. Thank you so much. Let's see if anyone has any questions for you. I think Lisa Fisser has a question. Do you want to open your microphone, Lisa, or do you want me? I can.
Yes, okay, thank
Perfect.
you. Thanks, Belle. Great study. I just wondering what the community response was, if you've had time to talk to them about adaptive release and what their thoughts were on perhaps that inevitable slide into the sea, as it were.
So as I think you're possibly aware, I unfortunately wasn't allowed to do any community engagement as part of this study. So I did have some chats with people initially, and the overall kind of feeling that I got from people was that they would rather see it moved than lost. As it stands, because it's owned by Carmarthenshire, the difficulty is funding, and so although there would hopefully be kind of community engagement and consultation no matter what kind of happens going forwards, I think ultimately, yes, the people will want it saved. It's kind of an iconic sea mark. It can be seen from right the way around the bay, and I think that on other kind of projects and things, I know that feedback has been generally kind of positive, where people have accepted the need to lose assets. I think there's possibly a little bit more resentment with this because it has been essentially just ignored for 100 years. So I think that in terms of kind of the adaptive release, I think that they would be happy with something kind of like a minimal intervention adaptive release, where kind of the plinth is repaired on a periodic basis, so that you're keeping it there in the landscape for as long as possible, but accepting that the restoration, there was a general acceptance that the cost of restoring it and then kind of 30 grand every 5 years to kind of maintain it would be quite considerable, and there's no way of recouping that financial outlay. And I think that people were kind of accepting of the fact that, you know, where choices have to be made about where public funds are spent, then it's probably not the best choice to spend it on, but I don't think it makes it any easier.
Sure, I'm just sort of interested in the analogy with the West Pier in Brighton, where people are, as a ruin, I know the circumstances are different, but as a ruin, people are still very connected to it, and it still draws people. And, you know, there is a programme, I think, of adaptive release there that seems to be working for the community. So hopefully it will be the same there. Thank you.
No worries.
Any other questions on that topic? Victoria, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I'll
Go ahead.
So first of all, I wanted to thank you to bring into the discussion the industrial heritage, because it's something that I think sometimes we forget, and it's a subject that I really like. And so, and my question is about, how do you make to involve, you said for constructing the metrics, for making of the measurement, you said you are involved with engineers and other professionals.
Yeah.
So I would like to know, how was this process of talking to them, or, you know, knocking the door, and how was exactly this process? How much time did it take to you to arrive to this and to make a consensus?
So initially, I wasn't, my initial intention wasn't to look at kind of creating a tool. It was more, you know, what can we do with it? And it just didn't feel quite kind of concrete enough for me. It was all very theoretical. So I'd already interviewed, we'd kind of had a big group discussion between the Royal Commission, CADU, and the local authorities involved. So that was kind of the starting point. And once we'd had that discussion and I went down this route, and I'd kind of stumbled across these other MAVT studies, I then went back to them and said, you know, I've kind of done this. Hopefully, I mean, it doesn't actually take an awful lot of time beyond, you know, kind of considering those attributes and the alternatives. So for them to actually kind of get involved, I kind of gave them quite a thorough explanation of what each attribute was kind of considering and what the alternatives involved and the costs involved. So from that regard, I suppose that was kind of my outlay of time. And so if you've got a project where you've already got kind of feasibility studies and things, then you've got that information and you can kind of pass that on to people. And then most of them actually got back to me within kind of an hour. They'd looked at it and what have you. So that's kind of as far as I've gone with them. I've just taken their data and kind of processed it. But I think in an ideal world, obviously you'd have a lot more, as Lisa said, kind of community consultation and engagement. And that would be a much bigger, I think, in some ways, kind of the professionals coming back with their kind of weights and scores. This is something they do all the time, so it's something fairly objective for them. But when you're then taking that to the community, that's when it becomes more kind of time extensive, just because you're going to have so many different opinions and views. It becomes a lot more subjective. So the kind of the process as it was quite straightforward, but I think the follow-up to what I've done to this point is to kind of take that back to so it's owned by Carmarthenshire, but it's within Swansea's borders, so kind of Swansea are responsible for the enforcement side of it. And so, you know, my next kind of thing would be to take it back to them and to say, look, this is the result, you know, kind of where do you take it from here, and have that community input. But yeah, I think that's where it becomes slightly less straightforward.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other questions for Bella? Yeah, Brandon. Brandon, do you want to unmute yourself to ask the question?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Bella. I was just wondering, for your weighting of the attributes, I noticed that the heritage values, that the evidential was almost half than the other ones, and I was wondering why the conservation officers were weighting it that way.
That's actually something that I did comment on in my conclusions, because there was no, and I think feeding kind of back to Victoria, this is where not doing it for a dissertation, you know, actually kind of doing it as proper a part of a proper kind of research study would be helpful, because you'd have those conversations. So my assumptions in their scoring it that way, I think this is kind of potentially twofold. One, kind of intangible heritage is quite important in Welsh culture. There's a lot of customs and traditions and kind of social history, I think, that tends to generally take precedence over physical heritage. So that was one of my thoughts, was that potentially they were just seeing that you know, the kind of the less tangible attributes of the site were maybe more important. My second thought was perhaps that where it has literally been kind of rotting since, well, 1920 essentially, so for 100 years, that maybe the feeling is that so much of the evidential kind of aspects of the lighthouse have been lost, that actually that's kind of not important anymore. I mean, there's kind of generally, I think it's an ICMOS and an industrial archaeology paper, but essentially once all the kind of the industrial components of an industrial asset have been lost, then that significance is kind of greatly reduced. And when they decommissioned the lighthouse in 1920, they took everything out of it. So there's, you know, the lenses have gone, the lights have gone, the ladder's gone. It's literally just kind of a bird cage now. I mean, it looks like a bird cage, and it acts as one. And I think the third thing is that when people consider evidential and historical value and authenticity, there's like an overlap of values. And I think that sometimes without clear definitions of kind of where those aspects lie, that the terminology can get confused. And I don't know if it's maybe come from there, that what they think of as evidential value is less the physical fabric and more what they can learn from it. And so because there's not a lot potentially to learn from it, the evidential value is less. But again, that's where I think following up with the people who contributed their kind of the weightings and the scores would be valuable to kind of feed back into just making sure that there's no misinterpretations, that we're all kind of clear and what have you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Bella? Okay, if not, thank you very much. And we're gonna go, of course, we're gonna go to the last talk for this third session. And for that, we're gonna have Victoria Báez presenting a paper that she has been co-authoring with Jesús, Aldana Mendoza, Daniela, Acosta Romero, Carlos del Cairo Hurtado, and Carla Riera Andrew. And they are part of the Blue Collaboratory project.
Thank you so much, Caterina. And so this presentation is basically a continuation of the Gabriela's work that she presented earlier. And so we wanted to focus a bit more on the methodological aspects behind the project in a very wide area. So, yeah. And so the first things we wanted to highlight was the very rich maritime cultural heritage in Cartagena. We have a lot of sites there that comes from different periods of time. And well, in the last few years, we've seen that this has been affected by several causes due cultural and natural phenomena. And so it has led to a partial loss of this context. So, for example, here to the analysis of climate change in Cartagena, that the reports have been made there, we see that most of the bay of Cartagena, it's affected, it's susceptible of flooding and also of coastal erosion in different parts. So our study, I'm going to turn back a bit, it's focused on three correct points of view in Cartagena, in the island of Tierrabomba. So the first is this, which is called the Tierrabomba town. And then here, Caño Lolo, and here in Boca Chica. So, Dani?
Okay, yes. So from this information and the problems surrounding heritage, climate change, and communities, Collaboratory project emerged. So this initiative that seeks to create a working methodology where archaeological, historical, anthropological, geographical, geological, oceanographic, and hydrographic disciplines, in parallel with local knowledge, contribute to the discussion on the effects of climate change in the city. So starting from the project, we have worked together to create methodologies that allow the participation of different stakeholders, which has made it necessary to resort to a wide range of information. So all this starts like in 2021. So a group of young people, social science professionals, will start this proposal interested in climate change and the effects it has on maritime heritage. So over time, institutions such as the University of Cartagena, the Mar, among others, joined to this initiative. Later in 2022, the fifth phase of the project was carried out, where we worked closely with the community and state institutions, trying to unite and put into dialogue knowledge from the exact science, such as map, statistics, weather reports, together with the knowledge of the community and what it can identify. And currently, the project is in the second phase, where more and more people from the community institutions are joining and everyone is participating in joint work meets.
And so what we're trying to do in this project is to have a diachronic perspective to different sources of information. And so we try to categorize in 3 different scales. So we wanted to analyze a long-term scale, a medium-term scale, and a short-term scale. So in the long-term scale, we are trying to analyze basically from colonial times until now. We would love to go to further and to analyze from more ancient periods, but in this moment we don't have much data about it because we don't have too much archaeological prehistoric Hispanic sites that we are able to characterize in this moment. In a medium term, we're trying to analyze the last, the last century, more or less. And in the short term, we're trying to analyze a very, very small scale of nowadays. So we're trying to involve different sources of information, such as the archaeological data, for example, the news, or the ancient photographies that we have of the city, and also historical cartography, because in Cartagena, we're lucky that we have a very long amount of historical cartography from the colonial times until now. And also, of course, oceanographic and hydrographic data that has been made by other scholars in the past. And also we're trying, as Dani and Gabi were saying before, we're trying to integrate the communities and local institutions to work with us. So, for example, through the historical cartography and aerial photography, we're trying to analyze the shorelines from the 17th century to nowadays, and to see and try to actually measure, taking into account all the problems that this could have now, the superposition of historical cartography to the Google Earth and everything. But we're trying to measure how much has been this change and what is the long-term phenomena, because sometimes we see that there is erosion, but sometimes we see that there are some sedimentation, and this is a long process. So we're trying to analyze and to characterize this rate from the 17th century to nowadays in different parts of the city. And we see, for example, also in historical cartography, that even in the colonial times, Cartagena has been affected by climate phenomena. So, for example, they built this kind of structure to protect the city from the flooding and all the natural phenomena that was actually affecting in that moment. And also we see through the newspapers the different ways that Colombia has been understanding climate change through recent years. How has been this seen in the daily life of the people? And we're trying also to understand the oceanographical and hydrographical point of view to analyze how is the usual behavior of the Bay of Cartagena. So we also have the participatory component, which Gabi has very well explained before. And lately, we've been trying to use new technologies such as photogrammetry to compare in a very short term the difference between our models, our clouds, or our point of cloud, to see the difference in the same site in different years. So we're trying to construct the data so we can monitorize through photogrammetry the sites. And for example, in Boca Chica, we have these sites that San Fernando, San Luis, Santiago, San Felipe, San Jose, Santa Barbara. They're all fortifications, but they still remain. And what we're trying to do is to involve the community, as Gabi was explaining earlier, giving them some toolbox so they can do actually and monitoring through the days. Dani?
Yes, so in this way, the knowledge of disciplines such as anthropology, archaeology, environmental history, computer science, marine science, also visual medium and conservation has been important in the generation of new knowledge, and it's having a perspective that takes into account each of the dimensions in which climate change affects. So in order to be able to propose improvement actions from different types of knowledge. So in this case, from anthropology and archaeology, it has been important to learn from exact science, such as biology, oceanography, among others that we mentioned, which generate joint work and comprehensive understanding of the problem. So this understanding is important because many times we cannot understand information or data from different disciplines. So it is not an easy job, but we believe it is the best way to do it. Also, the above has allowed the different actors to participate in the solutions and alternatives that are being created, since each of them is important in the different places where climate change acts, in addition to the actions that are taken. So we talk about the different institutions like Heritage Observatory of Cartagena, DIMAR, the community, local institutions. So working together allows there to be an understanding on the part of all the actors. So in other words, so try to speak the same language, understand climate change from all areas. So how to identify it, how to register it, and how to see all the different actions around the climate change. So this is how different dissemination initiatives arise. One of them is story maps, where an attempt is made to show different knowledge and different scales. So here you can see how there are images and information that try to account for climate change from past centuries to the present. So the idea is that the information is integrated and understood by the community in general.
And so we're also trying to diffuse our project in the news, so local people, not only local communities, but I mean the whole city can get involved into this process and to understand why this is important to talk about this topic. And for future perspectives, what we're trying to do, well, as we were saying before, this project has several phases. So the first is already done, and you can download the results if you want here with the QR, sorry. And we're now going into the second phase, and we're looking for funding so we can continue this process and also continue involving the local communities in this process. And we are also trying to link this project to others that our ONG has, like, for example, one of the Anthropocene and climate change, and the project of preserving legacies, which is about constructing a network, very big network with other parts of the world. And finally, we're trying to develop an application. So that's why we are involving different institutions and making discussion tables with a lot of actors. So we're trying to get the different impacts that can be measured in a short-term scale. And so with this application, the idea is that people will be able to, to take a very easy way to measure the impacts. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, both. It's a really great project, and well done for doing all this effort and organizing this initiative. Now, is anyone having any questions for Victoria and Daniela? No? Okay, I do have some questions. I was wondering how do the various actors that you have been involving, like how do they react to your efforts and your project? Like, for example, the municipalities locally, are they interested in like hearing your assessments, for example, of architectural buildings that might be prone to flooding and erosion? And I'm sure the universities do, but I'm wondering more like of other like governmental actors and how they, if they are interested to do and take action for something like that.
Yeah, well, it's been a process, and Gabi will complement my response for sure. But yeah, I think it's been a process. So now this project has been funded by the University of Cartagena and by the Cultural Heritage Institute of Cartagena. So we're trying to involve different actors, and what we're trying to do is to bring the institutions to the discussion table. So we're trying to do meetings with them to construct the process, to get them involved into the process, and not just at the end of the project, but in the different the different in the process.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, for example, we work with local institutions, the Victoria said, and actually with international institutions. No, the Perceivable Legacies is a project that with NatU, and they put us some tools for us. We discuss about maybe the terms of climate change in the world, and we have to do something workshops, and they gives more visibility. No, I think it's so important, the visibility, because the next year, well, we have to look at other projects, and maybe with the scholarships is the way that we work. But the idea is in the future connect with the government, and maybe this project continue, but in the long time, no? Because it's too short solutions, because it's a short projects, but if we want work with these actors that involved with this problematic, because maybe in Colombia with the law, with this new president that catch the idea for the climate change, maybe this type of projects continue, and this is our idea to present of this institution with this politics, and maybe to continue, and the institution and different actors involved, the national local institution and the international institutions.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions? No, I don't see anyone. Okay, in that case, we will go on our break. It's going to be a little bit longer than we expected, and you see in the program. So we're going to start again at 2:25 with Jacob Mo's presentation, because the previous speaker is unable to attend. So we're going to have basically a 20-minute break. So if you can come back just shortly before 2:25, and we will resume with session 4. Thank you.